We've talked about grow lights. We've talked about spring vegetables and summer vegetables starting seeds. Now we're going to give you our top tips for starting seeds right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening. We're your hosts, Ben and Batavia, and you can find me gardening in the country.
And you'll find me gardening in the city. Get ready as we dig deep into this
wonderful world of gardening, where we learn to grow and grow for change. This one, Batavia, is going to be one that I'm going to have to dig deep on for top seed starting tips. What do you think?
I mean, I only have like 15 or 16, so if we can use any of those. No one said that they were going to be great tips, but I got tips.
Hey, tips are tips, right?
Mm-hmm.
So before we get started, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining us. If you are new to the show, my name is Ben Gardner, and I'm with my lovely co-host, Batavia, and we are on the Backyard Gardens podcast. And if you'd like to, please join us on Patreon at Backyard Gardens. So anyways, enough of that stuff. Seed starting. So we've gone through the whole kind of process and different steps for starting different kinds of seeds for different seasons and all that stuff. So if you want to check all those out, that would be the last 3 episodes.
Yeah, so we went through grow lights, which is the beginning of our seed starting, right? You and I both use them.
Which I feel is very confusing for people. So I hope that kind of helps that situation.
I'm still torn about how confusing it is or isn't. But so we went through that. We touched a little bit on some other ways that people start indoors, but primarily grow lights. Moved on to starting spring vegetables indoors. Then last week we were on summer vegetables, because there is a difference, right?
There is a big difference, right?
And now we want to round out things with the 88 tips that will help you.
Don't say that. People are going to turn it off.
Yeah, right?
And I do want to say, too, last episode, Batavia brought up how she starts her pepper seeds before her tomato seeds to give them more time. And I was like, I don't do that. I'm going to do, I do different. And I'm going to announce it right now that I'm actually going to try that this year. So I'm going to start my pepper seeds 2 weeks early because of you, my sweet. So.
And didn't I say that I was thinking about starting my tomato seeds at the same time?
You did.
So we're just going to reverse. I'm going to do your method. You're going to do mine. And we're both going to say it's the same.
Well, I mean, we got to test it out because I'm curious to see if it makes a difference.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, the intent is getting the biggest and healthiest plant outdoors, right? I mean, that's the whole goal, right?
Yeah, that is. I mean, and that's the goal, is to set yourself up to be more successful too, because I feel like if you follow these tips today and what you've learned, you're going to set yourself up on a more successful journey, which will encourage you to keep going, because nobody wants to straight up fail.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, there's some stuff that we've talked about in the past podcasts and stuff that I've done that is just an epic fail. And it really, my seed starting journey started off real rough. So if we can help anybody eliminate that, then I'm happy, personally.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're happy.
It doesn't take much, honestly. I know people think it takes a lot, but
I think maybe I'm just going to start in the middle. Maybe one of the tips to kind of go back to what I said, big and healthy. Big doesn't always mean healthy, right? No. So we'll put that in our pocket and come back around. I imagine you want to kind of start with tips from the very beginning as you start seeds and walk through it.
Yeah. And so I actually released a YouTube video a while back, and in the beginning of that video, I made this proclamation, and I'm going to say it for this too, because this kind of goes in order. And I plead with you, please get organized before you start. That's, having all of your supplies set up is going to help you dramatically.
Yeah.
I think, don't you?
Yeah, I agree. It's different than taking a package of seeds and then just walking out of your door, putting seeds in the dirt, covering it and watering it. Like it's a little bit, not a whole lot, but a little bit more involved. When we talk about starting seeds, especially kind of the first out for the season, I'm going to say many probably are sowing multiple seeds. Like you're not going down and just sowing, a 6-pack of broccoli like that. And then kind of going back, back to your daily duties. Like that's not what you're doing. You're probably going to be sowing several seeds. And so I do think being organized, everything from if you're using labels to having clean, sterilized seed sales to having your soil ready, whatever concoction you're using for that soil. Obviously, you're sitting down to start seeds because you've already decided the timing. Like this is, your time is right for it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we're going to just, figure out your timing should have been first, but let's just say that. But, like to paint the picture for you, like I was doing a garden tour / a garden harvest in wintertime, and I was like, I was walking around and I needed my clippers. And I walked around for like 5 minutes looking for my clippers. I'm like, dude, I'm just wasting time. You know what I mean? Like, come on. And it's the same thing. Like you get started and you get going and, oh, I need my labels. Let me go get my labels. Oh, I need to get a can of water. Let me get a can of water. Let me get this. So quickly, what I would say you need a container. You need soil. You need water. You need seeds. You need something to dig in the dirt with. I like to use a chopstick. I've used pencils in the past. Those are my two tops.
To make the hole for the seeds.
Yeah. So those are like the basic things you need. And I would strongly encourage you when I say like a chopstick or a pencil or something, like your finger doesn't really cut it. So it doesn't have to be a crazy tool or anything, but just getting these things in order and getting that marker, the plant markers like labels is going to be crucial too, because what will end up happening is we'll go through and we'll do like, multiple seed cells and be like, what the hell was this? Wait, what? So, and I've actually gone to the point where I'm like digging through, trying to pull up an old seed, be like, oh, okay, this was,
So I use, when I'm starting seeds, I've used last year, painter's tape. So I'll put the blue painter's tape, or it comes in green, comes in some other colors. I'll put that on the actual seed cell, like on the side of it. And I write on it before I pull it off the roll. And I use like a regular black marker. And so I actually use the other side of the black marker to put my hole in the soil.
Yeah.
Right. So have the roll of the, painter's tape, write the name of the seed that I'm starting, the date, today's date that I'm starting it today, take it off the roll, tear it off, put it on the seed cell. And then I actually try to do that before I actually sow the seeds. Right. So if I get distracted and I have to come back to it, I can look at, I was supposed to be sowing this thing because it's already labeled.
You don't get distracted.
Well, when you talk about, wasting time, it's not that, you don't have another 5 minutes to spare. Getting distracted can lead to mistakes. It could lead to you kind of getting out of the mood, if you will, if you can't find enough things, you'll end up putting it off. And we know if you put it off, you can put it off another day and another day and another day. So.
And then the next thing you know, you've missed your window, or you're late on your window. Let me put it that way. It's not like you can sow a seed whenever, but you're eliminating your chance for the best possible grow and harvest time.
And you don't want to feel rushed, right? You don't want to start out feeling like you're behind, right?
Yeah. Oh, and the first thing I do too is I get some good music and put it on. Just saying, because it is a tedious process.
Yeah.
It really is. So, and when I started off, instead of using 6-packs, I used yogurt containers. And so I would take a stack of yogurt, because, usually we all eat, you eat the same kind of yogurt. So I'd get a stack of them, stack them up, and I would get a drill bit, and I would go right down the middle of like 10 of them at a time and just get right down in there, and then I was done.
Yeah.
And I would reuse those year after year after year. So that's a little tip too. Reusing is a big thing. Don't waste it.
Yep. I don't eat a lot of yogurt, but a garden friend gifted me a bunch of yogurt containers, and I did the same thing. And because they're a bit larger generally than kind of the 6-pack seed cell.
Yeah.
it's much easier to get those used, cleaned up, and ready for the next year. One thing to note as you're kind of deciding if you're using different size, kind of starts, meaning, yogurt versus a 6-pack versus something else, you want to decide, how big are you going to let this plant get indoors? That's kind of
right.
And to Ben's point, when it came to spring, if you don't have plans on up potting them, then that should dictate if you're going to use a smaller one or a larger one. We've talked a little bit about how, we see some seed starts in the stores that are like in the itty bitty ones. I think they just have their process down packed, and we're still working on it after all these years. So I don't know if I'd recommend that for every day.
And somebody asked me yesterday about timing, and I was like, man, it's an ongoing process, dude. Yeah. It's like, I feel like I will never get it right. I just get a little bit closer every year because you only do it once.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So once a year, you get to try and master this timing.
Yeah. And so it's a whole nother year until you do it again, right? So.
It is. So organization, I think, is where we should start. And then, breaking it down, going through different steps, different care models, stuff like that, and just really things to look out for are stuff that we're going to be talking about throughout this episode. So let's go to this break real quick, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to really unpack this thing and go through multiple tips and steps in order to be successful with your seeds. Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya. We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.
All right, Batavia, I want you to start off with your top tip. No, actually, just go in order. What's your next tip?
So after organization, and I'm speaking of this now as if there's just one time you're going to start, but we know that there are things you're starting on, February the 16th, then there's something you're starting on February the 26th, and so on and so forth. But February the 16th, let's call that as a start date. I want to make sure I'm paying close attention around February 17th, 18th. So you don't want to kind of set it and leave it. Some of these seeds will take longer to germinate than others, but I want to make sure a couple of days after I've sow those seeds indoors that I'm actually coming back around and looking to see what's germinated, looking to see if anything is dried out, obviously making sure my lights are on, as you get into those next couple of days. So that's going to be my next tip. Don't kind of set it and forget it. Right.
Yeah. And if I can add, with those first couple of days, like make sure you cover your seeds too with something clear that will retain that moisture and keep the soil. That will definitely help you with that process, because there's nothing more depressing than coming back after you did all of this work and finding that your soil is completely dried up. And, and essentially what's happened is that seed has used its energy to start its root, and then it dries up, and then you can't save it at that point. It's not like when a big plant wilts and you can kind of water it and bring it back. At this point, it's super fragile. So it's a big, that's a big thing. But just staying on top of it is key.
And if you need to stagger what you're starting because of, the cover or lack of cover, let's say that you don't want to use saran wrap, which is something that we suggested as cover. If you want to use those domes, but you don't have enough of them, once that seed is germinated, like that's what the purpose of that cover is. Right. To keep that moisture in for that germination. You could start the next batch and move that cover to that next kind of batch of seeds. If, again, your resources when it comes to what you already have, what you want to spend money on and so on, if you're strapped for that, then it's a way to kind of, I wouldn't even say be frugal. I think it's just, you'd be surprised how quickly these things kind of add up as far, not even cost, but even just storage areas. So.
Yeah. So, you have to remember too that we're not trying to keep all of the soil wet just around the seed. You want to keep it moist. So I just bought like, I think it was like a 12 pack of those domes to put on my seed trays. But for years, I only had 3 trays. I had 3 domes. And so the way I would operate is I would cover it. And then I knew like the first day or so, like everything would be kind of good. There's not really a lot of chance of it drying out. So I might stagger by a day or something. And then I would fill up all of my trays and everything, but I wouldn't plant them. And then I would move them over same way, you know. So once one popped, then I'd move it over and keep going down the line. Now I kind of got tired of that, so I could do all of them at once. But that's always an option too. And I've actually found my domes or had them off of stuff that I bought or something like that. So, and I still have them as backups. But my next tip is if you're starting out anew at this, is that right? Anew? Yeah, sounded weird.
A new year, a new me.
Yeah. So it's wearing thin though. It's wearing thin already.
It is. I mean, once you get to February, there's no telling which version you're going to get. So
you ain't lying. But I say start small, start simple. Don't get some kind of crazy ass seed and try to start. You know, look at what seeds you're starting, look at what you want to grow, and find something that's fairly easy to grow. Like, I mean, you know, grow a vegetable, because flowers are notoriously difficult to start. You know, and some herbs are very difficult to start as well. Wow. So maybe we shouldn't start with those. We should start with something simple. Like, I mean, a tomato seed is pretty simple. Peppers can be a little bit more difficult. I think we talked about that last time. Lettuces, 50% of the show finds that brassicas are easy to start. Yeah. And 50% don't. So, I mean, we're kind of split down the middle there.
And that 50% is not giving up, but yeah.
But I mean, just, you know, if you decide you want something to start by seed, make sure you look at it. And the easiest in my mind to start is like squash, cucumbers, pumpkins. All of those are the easiest seed to start. They're nice, big, fat seeds. You can drop them in. You can see they grow fast, you know. And those are really good, like standard, like squash, like summer squash is a very good standard summer vegetable that most people want to try and grow. So that big, fat, juicy seed that you can get, you know, you're not going to, because I mean, there's some like flowers and stuff. I mean, some of them are like dust.
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
which actually, in that instance, if you're starting super duper small seeds, it may be in your best interest to sow a little bit heavier. Just to account for, like, you'd be surprised where you thought you put the seed there, but not quite. Yeah. But I want to go back to, so one of the questions that you get early on is kind of, you know, what should I grow? So we're not going to go all the way back there, but I do want, when it comes to deciding what you're starting indoors, like, you don't have to start everything indoors. You can do a combination of starting some seeds indoors. You can direct sow some other seeds. You can buy some transplants. You can have this garden for this year be a mixture of those 3, and that's perfectly fine. The things we're starting indoors are the things that need kind of the jump start, the head start, right? So if there are things that you're okay with, starting outside later, you know, save yourself some time and do that, right? And then start those that, again, like your peppers and your eggplants and your tomatoes that normally, another good way to look at it is if you would normally buy it at the store, like as a full plant, then that's something that you want to start indoors, right? You know, because that thing has had a head start with growing. But other things, and I'm just trying to manage the whole start small tip. Other things, and that could be some lettuces, you know, if you're starting in the spring, you could direct sow some lettuces instead of starting them indoors, you know. But just if you want to try to make this more manageable for yourself, focus on the things you really, really need to start indoors versus those that you can direct sow. Because the whole idea of watching this and nurturing it, it feels like to me there's more work when you have to do that indoors than out. Yeah. But it could be that I'm still a couple of years new to this, so...
No, and I mean, for years I started, you know, I've always started tomato seeds. And that was like what I started with. And then I kind of graduated up, and I would start those, and then I would start squash and stuff like that. And then I started putting stuff outside. I always planted my beans directly outside. And then I would go buy the rest in seed starters, transplants. And the only reason why I start for my second year now 100% my own seeds is because I'm a cheap bastard. And I just know that it's a lot cheaper to start, start all of your own vegetables, because all of my seed packets, it's like I was talking to my wife, between just me buying seed packets, I spend $60 a year on seed packets. That's going to get me 3 years worth of plants easily. So, over time, it kind of makes it a little bit better. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but this is all. So you were speaking, if you're new to this, there's a certain level of it being gradual, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's very, dude, I've been starting seeds for like 8-9 years now, and I'm just now on my second year of like 100%.
Yep.
So, you can space it out for sure. The first flower ever planted, for instance, by seed was a foxglove, and their seeds are like dust. So when I put it in there, I was like, all right, cool. And I just like sprinkled it on. And then the whole thing was just covered with plants. I didn't know what to do with it. And I was like, what do I do? It's like I had this huge, I tried to separate it. Couldn't separate them. I couldn't do anything. It was just a wasted thing, so I didn't really take my time. I just jumped into it head first when I should have started like a sunflower.
Yeah. Or
something, So that's kind of, different levels that you can do.
So can I give another next?
I guess so.
Okay. Don't be afraid to start over, right? So once we have plants, and this comes straight out of a lesson learned from last year for me. Once you have plants in the ground, whether it's your house plants inside or plants in the ground outside, like there's more skin in the game, right? This thing is on its way. When we're talking about these seedlings, hell, even if they're seedlings, right? So if you have something that's germinated and then, you have the seedling here and something starts to go wrong, like don't spend a whole lot of time trying to nurse that thing. Let's get this started again, right? You're likely days or maybe a couple of weeks, and you're better off starting it again and, trying to correct whatever you think that mistake was that led to the issue you had, and giving that plant a better chance than trying to nurse this thing that's, struggling from the beginning. Also, if there's some question around, did it germinate or not? Like there's nothing there. If you're me, you may not have put a seed in that tray, in that cell. So definitely come back around. I've actually dropped additional seeds again and then saw things germinate, which likely meant I forgot, skipped over it somehow, some way. So that's going to be my next tip. And I probably wouldn't say that again as much.
I have that going on right now.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't say that as much. I'd probably say give it a little bit more time, a little bit more care if you're outdoors when you're kind of gardening. But for seedlings inside, you're trying to give this thing a head start. I know it feels like starting over is counter to that, but do it, man.
Well, see, for me, so this is actually, I'm going to give you an example, and then it kind of dovetails quickly into the next one that I have. So I have 36 Paris Island romaine lettuce seeds that I started, 36 cells.
One of my favorites.
Actually, I take that back. I have 48 cells started. I have 4 seeds coming up. So I have 2 things that I do is I go through, I'm like, okay, I take my little chopstick, I don't see it, I lightly just dig around a little bit, see, a lot of times I can get a seed to pop up. I'm like, oh, there's a little root there. Cool. Let me gently put it back down. And a lot of times what ends up happening is I planted it too deep. So then I'll just, like right now, like I'm going to go and redo it because I planted it too deep. It's too late. The seed's already rotted in there because that can happen. So I'm going to replant all of those seeds. Now, I will say this, the fact that I have like somewhere between 2 and 4 of all of those seeds coming up, something a little fishy is going on. Maybe I got a bad seed pack or something. Maybe it's an old seed. Either way, it's just, I'm going to go restart. It's not a big deal. You just go put it back in and start back over.
Yeah.
But don't wait too long, because that soil, nothing is in that soil sucking out the moisture. So it's been sitting wet. So don't let it sit there for a long time.
Yep. And you'll have to use your judgment here, depending on if you're starting over, why you're starting over. So in some cases, I'm using the same soil that was there. Like if there's nothing that's germinated, then my guess is add another seed and see what happens. Add another 2 seeds and see what happens. But if you do have something where there's some growth there, you may need to put some fresh soil in. Because remember, we've talked about a lot of the seed starting soil or mix that we use. It didn't have a ton of nutrients, so you don't want to try to start something over and you just pulled out, a plant that actually had its true leaves. Like you want to give that new seed, if you're starting over, a better chance. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does make sense. And so, that being said, just make sure you're not planting too deep. Usually it's twice the depth of the diameter of the seed.
Yeah.
The depth, excuse me, let me rephrase that. Plant your seeds the depth of twice the diameter of the seed. So when you pull that seed out and you look at it and it's super tiny, it doesn't go very far under. And so what happens with me is I'll water and then it'll sink deeper. Or as the soil settles, it'll sink deeper. So, and some of these seeds are really fine. And man, they're such a bitch when they're really small seeds. Like I hate it because I got big hands and big fingers. And so you know what I did to try and combat that? I had a child. Because I'm like, oh, they got small fingers. Man, he put us in like 10, 15 seeds. And I'm like, no, hold up, man. You got a whole food forest in this one little cell. So
yeah, definitely. Because there are 2 ways. There is we've talked about like having something to poke the hole in, but there's also level your soil, and then put the seed down and then put more soil on top of it. Right. And I go back and forth on which way that I've done this over the last couple of years. But if you do it the second way, where you're putting more soil on top, you could also be adding too much soil. Right. So there are a couple of ways where you could put that seed in too deep. I wouldn't go digging things up from the very beginning, like okay, let's re-dig this up on moment 1. But that could be something that's attributing to your issue, and I've done the same thing. Like you talk about, like, this is day 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. A seed packet says germination within 4 days. And I'm just like double checking to see if there's anything in there.
Yeah. I mean, because the germination times are estimates too. So I always give it a little bit extra time, because you don't want to be like, all right, it was 4 days. The packet said 4 days. Let's do this. What the hell's going on? So you want to give it a little bit of time. But yeah, definitely dig in there and look and see what you got going on. Because that's the biggest thing, is just giving it time. This is a very slow process, which is why we start seeds inside, because it is very slow to start and get them up and going.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, I guess we've mentioned soil a lot in this, so I would just make sure you're using a seed starting mix and nothing real chunky. Nothing with like a lot of debris in it. If you buy like a bag, potting soil, I have like chunks of like bark in it and stuff. You don't want to use that,
or screen that stuff out. So let's, so the don'ts. You definitely don't want to use like your regular, natural soil from dirt from your outside, right? You don't want to do that, right? You can, but it's preferable not to. Yeah, if you're going to mix it up and to make your own seed starting mix, then that may work for you. But the idea of it being that it's so heavy can create some problems. We talked about I'm still going to use potting soil this year, but I do pull out kind of those chunks that you're talking about. Ben has had some trouble with potting soil, so you're all in on your own seed starting mix. Then they obviously sell seed starting mix, and the only way I would say, caution around that is just the expense. It's just so expensive. It is expensive, and it's just expensive, and some of it's not really that good. So if you want my seeds soil recipe, I think I put it in the Grow Light episode. So you can go back and check that out, and I mixed in with the recipe of the day, so you get food and soil recipe. Food and dirt. Food and dirt. God made dirt, and dirt don't hurt, right? Yeah. So
soil is a big key of it, and then watering. So there's two methods. There's over, and then there's under watering, like, watering from below.
Bottom watering.
My issue with top watering, getting a water can of watering on top, when you have fresh seeds, it's going to sink the seed deeper into the soil. So what do you say about that? Where are you at? I know we've talked about this, but just to reiterate.
It's okay. I rarely top water. And while it's just been 2 years, there have been a lot of seedlings that have, seeds that have been started in these last 2 years. And so I feel comfortable saying I rarely top water. I almost always bottom water. The only caution is I am loading water. So if I have my seed tray, right, my seed, what do you call them again? I always forget the name of them. Seed cells.
Seed cells.
They're sitting in a seed tray. For the ones I use, these trays don't have any holes in them. So I can basically take one of the seed cells out, pour water into the bottom of that seed tray, and let it sit and soak up that water, right?
That's what I do.
Yeah. And so I do that for the number of seed trays that have seed cells in it that need watering. What I have done is forgotten, and I'll come back a day later, 2 days later sometimes, and still find that water is still sitting in that tray. That's not a good thing, right? So that seed and seedling has been just soaking in there. So my only caution is make sure that, if you're using that bottom watering, that you're dumping that water out. And sometimes that could be a pain too. But anyway, I still prefer bottom watering over
so I never dump water out. I just let it, I put little bits in at a time, wait for it to soak it up. And as the plant gets bigger and there's more roots, it soaks up fast because there's actually something at the bottom of the seed cell waiting for you to water it. And so my other theory about this too is bottom watering allows the plant to go search for water. So it actually digs its roots down deeper in a downward manner, and plus it's cleaner. It's not I don't get a lot of splash or anything like that. So
and I think your way is a better way, a little bit at a time, so you don't have this whole tray of water. And a note here, like, when is there enough? When you see that top of the soil is damp, right? Like,
and it takes time. So do it, walk away, and come back. I mean, the whole seed starting process is not a short process. So I'll take and put, maybe ½ inch in at a time, especially when there's no real plant growing and, it's just the seed, and it's maybe like, it's got not even its true leaves yet. It's just come up. I'll do it that. And once it comes up at the first, I might do a top watering because it's already settled and I'm not worried about burying it deeper. I may do that just to get that surface. But once that plant comes up and there's roots in it, man, it's game on, because I put it in there and I'll walk away, and then like minutes later, it'll be sucked up. So you just don't want it to sit. And if I do let it sit, I just don't water it for a while. Sometimes my full grown, ready to go outside plants, I'll be waiting. They'll be big and I'll be waiting for the temperature to rise to get them outside. And I'll have overwatered them a little bit, and I won't water them for a week or two. Where if I do it right, I'm usually watering every other day at that point.
Letting
because that's
the natural air. Dry it up.
Let it use its water and dry it up. And I mean, because that's the thing too, is as we get closer and closer to moving them outside, one way you can tell that like either you need to up pot or you need to get them outsid is if the water is just getting soaked up like that. Then that's going to give you a good
tip. Because there's less soil there, more roots, which is actually a good thing.
Because I've pulled them out and been like, damn, there ain't even no soil left in here. Where the hell is all of the, where is everything at?
It's ready to go and join its brothers and sisters.
Right.
In the garden land.
So we've talked a lot about when we first start the seeds. Why don't we move into, and unless you have something else, move into when they're actually actively growing? What do you say?
Think we should? Absolutely.
Okay.
So we're past the point of These seeds have germinated. We have even true leaves. Let's just hop over there, right?
Yeah. You have true leaves. You've got an actual plant. Mm-hmm. You've done it at this point. Now the only thing is just don't screw it up. You know what I mean? That's how I look at it. Like once you get the plant going and it's got true leaves and it's actively growing, like it's on you at this point. Like if it dies, you did it. So,
and the first set of leaves that are not the true leaves is the C word that I always have trouble pronouncing, but also seed leaves is a name for them as well. So those first two that sprout up.
I'm going to tell you how to say it right now because somebody, go ahead and talk.
Yeah. And so the leaves that come after that first set of two would be the first set of true leaves. And so that's when we talk about, all right, now we're rocking and rolling. Because there's still you're still on the watch. There's still they're in the ICU of plant starting, even once they get their true leaves and that first set of leaves, the seed leaves, and then moving on to the true leaves. It's still a point where things can go left. Go ahead.
So Ferry Morris actually posted on Instagram the other day, and I actually commented on it. They said, so what is, and they said the C word, and it's not the see you next Tuesday word. It's the name of the first leaves that come up. So you're going to have your seed come up, and then it's going to have these leaves, and they all almost look the same. And then they actually die, and then you get your true leaves. And everybody freaks out because those leaves die, but their purpose is to get that first flush of nutrients before it's, and they spelled it phonetically, cotyledon.
Yeah, I wasn't going to be there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's spelled, the phonetic spelling of it is Kotleeden. So we'll say seed leaves though, because even now that I'm reading it, but I commented, I was like, I've never known how to say this word.
Yeah.
It's so hard.
Sometimes they die after your true leaves, right? So you're rocking and rolling, like, all right, we're ready to go. And then it's like, oh, and that it's the same thing outdoors. That same thing happens. This is not unique to seed starting indoors. But anyway, we got this real plant now, Yeah. This is a contender now. And so this is where we want to nurture it like we would kind of a baby plant. You're making sure that your grow lights, if you're using them, should have been high or low enough where these first set of true leaves aren't going to bump up against it. You wanted to give 6 inches or something off of the seed starting cell anyway. So you still should be fine with the height of your grow lights. That's not a concern. But as that thing does grow, you need to be prepared to make adjustments, right?
I keep mine 2 inches above my plants.
All times?
All times. So, the reason when you said that, I kind of cringed a little bit because we have to be careful because the stronger the light, the higher, so it can be adjusted. Yeah, that's like 3 or 4 inches.
I don't know. I bet I got a tape measure somewhere.
No, you don't need to bust out a ruler. We don't need to do this.
I'm terrible about that too, though. so I'm going to say this way: my index finger. That's the difference between.
That's 3 inches.
The top of my light and the seed. So 3 inches.
Yeah, that's about 3 inches. So, I mean, that's the thing, too, is when they start really growing, though. I mean, dude, I've had to come out and raise my light every day for a while, especially if we fertilize. Once we give it a fertilize and it really gets that juice and it's like, woo, hello, and it'll push. We were talking about this in the last episode, tomatoes.
Yeah.
It's like they go to a certain point and the next thing you know, they're like, bam, 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 bam. They just start growing. And that's when we want to be very careful and keep them up. And I've woke up in the next day and they'll be all jammed up in the lights and stuff. And what'll happen if that does happen is, one, it can shade out the rest of your plants, but two, it'll burn the leaves.
Yeah.
So if it's resting on the light and the leaves burn, don't freak out. It's just because the light was resting on it. But you want to make sure that they can breathe too.
I know you're looking at me trying to figure out what the hell happened. So
I am.
It hit me I got it. The bug hit me, right? I've been trying to get out of the winter blues and it's it's just been a chore, starting seeds and everything. It's all right, you got to do it. You're going to regret if you don't do it. But your description of, kind of how this thing is going to grow, man, I'm in it, man. Let's get ready to rumble. All right, it's game
Almost
time,
there.
man.
You're almost there. So, I mean, oh shit. You didn't give the spring countdown.
Oh, man. Listen, Dazed. What's my favorite site?
Timeanddate.com.
Oh, Days Between Dates is my Google search that brings up time and date. So spring is when? March 2020.
First, 20th.
Thank you. This is, I mean, we're actually at this point talking about like hours away. So as
No,
of
we're
the,
not.
yeah, I know, right? As of the airing of this episode, we are 32 days away.
Almost a month. Almost. We should put it off by a day.
Yeah, man. I know, right? This won't come up until we're actually 30 days away, though.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
So as you get
spring
closer to
fever.
spring too, you know, as you're listening to this show, you're probably at this point, you're at a perfect time to start your seeds. Some kind of seed can be started, so you're going to be experiencing a lot of this. And when that tomato takes off, you're just going to be good to go.
It's
right?
It's good stuff, man. And I just realized
Don't you get wrapped up in timeanddate.com, damn it.
I am wrapped up in
Focus.
it. Yeah.
I know you are. Focus.
Because
I
the first
see
day
it.
of spring this year is March 20th, which means it's actually 31 days. Anyway, okay, yeah. So you're a month out, which is actually a really good point. So, you know, we talk about spring, we talk about first day of summer, you know, we talk about last frost, you know, all of those things mean different things, right? As far as kind of your garden calendar, if you will. But
Yeah.
I love the idea of spring and the first day of spring being an indicator. For me, I'm still in my first, like I still have, you know, frost coming. There's still a chance of frost. But some of my winter hardy stuff, cold tolerant stuff, I can make my way outside, you know. So my next tip is going to be, as you're nurturing these plants, because now they're real plants, right? Start watching your calendar and your weather, right? So I'm not talking about like the 5-day forecast because everything is still indoors. I'm talking about like your 14-day forecast. So
Yeah.
this is more of building a bank of knowledge for you. If you insist on not going to the time and date calendar, which will give you all of this historic information, because it is one of the best sites on the internet. If you don't want to go there and you want to depend on your memory, that's fine. You know, I don't understand
That's
you.
what I do.
But that's fine. No, in all seriousness, this is where you're starting to pay attention to those things. Remember when I talked about how someone suggested, oh, you need to track how much sunlight you're getting at a certain time of year? And I'm just like, no one's going to spend time doing that. And then I started paying attention to that and just making a mental note. That's all we want to do here for a tip. Start making a mental note of what your February the 17th weather is like, what that forecast is saying for the next couple of weeks, and continue to do that as we approach spring.
Yeah, because as a gardener, we are very in tune to the weather.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're new to gardening, over the years, you're going to start to know more and more. Like for me, in February, it is very common for us to get 80-degree days. You know, like I know that at some point we're going to be in the 70s then, but we can still get freezing. Like I know that coming into it. And I know that March, you know, I know my last frost date, for example, is April 17th, I think, this year, maybe 15th. But I also know that we always get a frost like April 20th, like every single year we'll get like this crazy frost, because we've talked ad nauseum in past episodes about these frost dates and how they're really percentages of a chance of getting a frost date. So generally speaking, your frost dates you get, there's a 80% chance that you're not going to get a frost, but there's still that 20% chance. And I'm telling you, every year,
Yeah.
every single year we get one. So, you know, that kind of leading up to it, you know, just be aware that you're going to learn over time, and time and date will help you, and you'll start to know patterns and stuff like that. And listen to your local folklore about that, because a lot of times, a lot of those sayings and stuff were true.
Yeah. And it even
But before
we go there,
ahead.
it even ties into like when you've started. So you probably have used some, it feels right that I should be starting this thing. You may have used a calendar. You may have used, you know, some calculator to say I should start, you know, my broccoli at this time or my tomatoes at this time. This is where you're kind of almost unconsciously fine tuning that. So you're seeing the size of, especially if this is the first time out. Like, I knew what tomato plants looked like in the stores, and most times they're like really full plants. But as I watched tomatoes, going back to 2020, tomato plants as an example, grow, right? You're seeing how long it takes to get up to size, if you will. And that's important as it relates to what your weather is like outdoors.
Right. So before we go to our recipe, I want to say this. I want to talk about fertilizing very quickly. If you feel so fit to fertilize, I know that 50% of the show does and 50% doesn't. So what I like to do is, first of all, my seed starting mix, if you go back and listen to that recipe, it has compost built into it to an extent to help with a natural fertilizer, but it will end up eating it up. So if you're going to fertilize, know the difference between organic and synthetic, slow release and non-slow release. And I would recommend I'm always going to recommend using an organic fertilizer. So an organic fertilizer will release slowly when it interacts and starts to decompose in the soil, but you want to fertilize lightly. If you're going to use a synthetic fertilizer, note that it feeds that plant the second it hits it, and you need to highly dilute it. It is better to give it just a little taste of fertilizer than a full dose, because you will burn and you will kill your plants. And this is where I'm talking about. Once that plant's growing and you kill it, it dies. It is your fault. And this is the number one way that I know people do it, because it's getting closer to spring. And there's statistics about it. They get closer to spring and they're like, it's got to get bigger. It's got to get bigger. Let me give it a dose.
Yeah.
And that plant's just not ready for it. So I recommend an organic fertilizer and a light dose of it. You can use stuff like fish oil or fish fertilizer, which smells, but if you dilute it a lot, I mean, I would take a 2-liter bottle and put like maybe a teaspoon in. And that's what I do. The smell is not that bad. Or you can use some kind of organic fertilizer. If you use organic granules, it needs to be in contact with the soil so it can begin to decompose. And at that point, when you put that down, it will be about 2 weeks before it will actually start to feed, because that's how long it takes for it to start to break down. So just note that. And I feel that it's important, but some of us don't, and that's okay. So I'm a big feeder. I believe in that. I believe in getting them a jump start. And note that once you start feeding them, it's game on. Yeah. They are going to grow.
So I'll comment on this, even though I'm not one that's diligent about it. I really wish I don't have to. That's really it. It's not that I don't believe in it. It's just like, can I get away with not doing it? A lot of what we'll talk about, whether it's water, whether it's fertilizing, even light, think about the difference between that plant and the soil it's sitting in indoors compared to sitting in your garden, whether it's a container outside, if it's an in-ground bed, a raised bed, it doesn't matter. There's going to be more soil, right? More airflow, the sun's going to manage that plant differently. Outdoors can compensate from your everyday error as a gardener, right? Yeah. Your indoor seeds that you've started, they don't compensate for some of those mishaps as quickly or as easily, or in some cases at all, right? Right. And so that's just something to keep in mind. And it's going to take some missteps and some fails before you get it. And it doesn't mean that you won't ever, you're probably always going to have something that doesn't quite make it, and that's fine. But we just want to be able to give you some of the tips and tools that can help this journey for you. For me.
Yeah. For us. Yeah. I mean, just be careful, but note that, I'm with Batavia. Like, I hate that I have to it is kind of a pain, but in the middle of winter and you're just itching to get in your garden going, it's a nice thing to kind of have to sit there and tinker with a little bit. And then, I'll just do really light feedings. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the recipe. And then we're going to come back and we're going to actually talk about hardening off, kind of finish that process, because that's the big part of it. So without further ado, we're going to give you the recipe of the day.
Ben, what question do we get asked the most?
I would have to say It's probably more something like, what are the products we use in our gardens the most?
Ding, 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 ding. That's the correct answer. Hey, there's an Amazon link below.
When you get over to the Amazon store, know that you're going to be supporting the podcast, but all of the products both Batavia and I have used in our gardens. We want to see you all over on YouTube, so check us out at Backyard Gardens TV to watch our podcasts and other gardening videos.
All right, we had a lot to cover in less than 10 minutes, recipe, and then wrapping up. So I'm going to get in here. Chipotle sweet potatoes. So this is obviously going to be spicy. I'd say if it's family of 4, or there's going to be some leftovers, you're going to start with 3 or 4 kind of medium to large size potatoes. Some people for potatoes, they boil them to soften them because this is going to actually be like a puree. I normally just clean them up, prick them, and then put them in the oven at about 350 for about 90 minutes. Similar to a regular white baked potato, you just want this potato to be soft through and through. Once it's done cooking, take it out. We're going to remove all of the goodness of the sweet potatoes. So just peel it. You're going to put it in a bowl. We're going to take some of and I'm just using it from a can. I don't know, kind of the benefit that some of you all have from what you're growing, but you want that, smallest can of Chipotle chilies. You want them to be in adobo sauce. Take about a chili, maybe a chili and a half, depending on how spicy you want it. More clearly spicier. A couple of tablespoons of the sauce as well. You're going to add your potato meat, sweet potato meat, and the peppers to either a bowl where you can use a hand mixer. You can add it to a food processor. I'd probably not go with a blender. You just want to be able to fold this in together. Add 3 or 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. So a tablespoon about for each potato. So however many you've used as you have adjusted. A little bit of salt to taste. Take all of that you've blended together, pureed together, processed together, and you're going to put this into a baking dish and put it back in the oven because now you want that mixture to bake. Leave it uncovered about 30-35 minutes. You just want it to set. Not as thick as you would set cornbread. It's going to be more casserole looking like. And it's going to be a different flavor and taste because some of us did have a good sweet potato harvest. Some of us still have sweet potatoes from the holidays, right? We want to use and eat them and enjoy them in a different way. Chipotle sweet potatoes.
I say put 4 chilies in it.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's just like salt. Once you go in, it's no really, you're not pulling that back.
No, I know. I love Chipotles. So that's one of my goals for this year is I want to make my own Chipotles.
Dry or canned or both?
I don't know yet.
Okay.
Let's just take baby steps.
Yeah,
How's that?
All right,
baby steps. Yeah. And when you grow Chipotles, it ain't Chipotles. It's just a jalapeno. So don't let them fool you. That being said. So we've gone through everything. We've focused a lot on your babies, new seeds, getting them started, and then kind of getting them up, getting them going.
Potting them up is what we didn't cover. So we want to briefly talk about that too.
Yeah, and so potting them, well, we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah, but it's still a tip. It's important.
Cover it off.
Real quick, everything doesn't need to be potted up. If you don't have plans on getting the plant outside and into the garden, and you realize that plant, Ben gave a great note on it. If you're watering it and it's like dry within hours or the next day, that means that thing probably needs to get into a bigger pot and some additional soil needs to be added in. And so if any of you are...
Stat means no.
Yeah. If any of you all are plant lovers, house plant lovers, it's the same process. I mean, it's nothing special about how you're going to pot it up. I normally just put my fingers on either side of the stem, turn the container that I have the plant over in, and then put it in a larger container, backfill it with soil. And then obviously you're going to water again at that point. I think what's your guideline? You're not potting up if you plan on going outside with the plant within 2 weeks, and then how you normally manage it?
Yeah, I usually at minimum 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. I want them to, and this will dovetail directly into hardening off. But yeah, if they're going to be in the house for at least 2 weeks, then I will consider potting them up. But a lot of times what I'll do is, or this is how I learned, if I wanted to know what needed to be potted up, I just went to the store and looked at what they sold. And if it was in the 6-pack, then I didn't pot it up. So that was typically how I ran that operation. But yeah, it's got to sit in that, because there's no point in potting it up and then moving it right outside.
Yeah. Another way you could check too, if you're unsure, if the soil is dry enough, you can pull that plant out of the pot. And if you do see a bunch of roots wrapped around it, it would like some more soil, please and thank you. If you don't see a whole bunch of roots, because sometimes these plants look big, but they still haven't really developed a bunch of roots, and so they're fine where they are.
Or lift up the pot and just look on the bottom too. If it's coming out of the bottom of the seed cells, then you know. But watering it, I've had them where I water them and then they wilt, and then you're like, okay, and then you water them and then they wilt. You water it and you're like, all right, I need to do something. Yeah. And so the reason why I said it goes directly into hardening off, because during that process of hardening off, which is the process of getting your seeds adjusted from their nice, warm electric blanket of 68 to 70 degrees in your house, then you need to ensure that they get ready for the outdoors, because it's going to be cooler. It's going to be windier, and it's going to be, the sun is going to be way more harsh. The sun is going to be the equivalent of like hundreds of your grow lights, thousands of them. So we have to get them adjusted. And we didn't say this, and we need to come back around real quick because I brought it up. You need to have some kind of air movement on your plants, and I use fans on mine, little desk fans, because that'll keep them moving when they're in the house and strengthen those stems up. Because if you don't, when you put them out, the first wind that blows, it's going to fall over. So just knowing that. But what we do is you take the plant, you put it outside. The first day you put it in the shade, and then you bring it in at night. The second day you give it a little bit more sun. I give it like maybe an hour or 2 of sun the first day, bring it back in. And then the third day, give it 3 or 4 hours, bring it back in. The fourth day, you keep just stepping up and stepping up and stepping up, and you're easing it in, and you keep bringing it inside at night until it's really out there for the full day. So my hardening off process can take about a week to a week and a half total. I'm really slow about it because I've had full-blown garden started, and then I move them outside and boom, I burn them. And I'm like, son of a bitch, you're talking about 12 weeks of work, and you just come back and they're just like charred.
Yeah.
So, and it will burn your plant. It will literally not look like they're on fire, but it will literally discolor them and ruin the leaves.
So quick tips for me on that. Thanks for the walkthrough. Find a good place to harden them off.
Yeah.
Right. So before you start pulling plants out, time is on your side. Take your time. Right. So don't get rushed. It's easier to pull a plant back in to protect it than it is to pull it out of the garden once you've planted it, if it really wasn't ready for that adjustment. And that's all it really is an adjustment, because you're pulling it out and bringing it outside, likely because it's sizable. Like the plant is the size that it needs to be to go out. And we know that, clearly if seedlings start from seeds that grow up from the soil, plants don't need to be huge. This is, again, all about the whole getting it a head start. But it's a seedling that germinated from indoors when you're starting your seeds is very different than a seedling that germinated directly in your garden, right? The strength is different. And even if it's been growing, to Ben's point, 6-8 weeks or something inside, that thing is still like, walking around like a newborn baby when it first gets out there, and you need to protect it. So.
Yeah. And part of the reason too, I said like minimum 2 weeks before you up pot, and this really goes for like tomatoes and peppers for me, and eggplants too, is during that process of hardening them off. If you go back to the last episode, I talk about it like it's almost like having a little container garden. You can still at that point leave them outside, because a lot of times you're still going to get cool nights. You might want to bring them in and just leave them outside all day and let them get as much sun as possible. And they can grow a lot, depending on the size of plant you put in. And you can be putting in a big plant. As long as it doesn't get overly root bound and abused, you're good to go, man. So it's just, once I get them outside, so the way I do it is I have one corner of my porch up against my house is complete shade all day. Might get a little bit of dappled sun through the trees or something for a little bit in the morning. They start off there, and then I move them 3 feet forward a day, each day. And then when they get to the edge of my porch, I start moving them to the left, because then they're getting into complete sun where it's like, 5-6 hours. And then if I'm still not ready, I'll move them out into another place I have in my yard set up where they will get all day sun and they can grow because once you get them out there and they get settled and they get used to it, you're going to see, once again, it's going to be like a natural fertilizer almost. Boom. They're just going to start growing because they're going to be getting a lot more light.
Yeah. So keep an eye, as a tip, keep an eye on those. As I've had seedlings that are being hardened off in May, like it could be pretty warm. So there's, again, same idea. There's not as much soil in that seed starting tray, that cell, that yogurt pot, whatever have you, as it is going to be when you plant that thing. Just make sure that it's not drying out as you're hardening off. So keep an eye on that. I've lost some plants based on that, or had to do more work to try to nurture them back because I just lost track of things. But I do that same thing when it comes to like moving it forward. I have like this little table on my deck that basically you can get sun comes through it, but the table has a cover to it. So it's really, it's just enough so I can slide the trays underneath it if I need to, if it's going to be more rain than I really want them to get or something during that couple of weeks process. So you'll learn what works for, around your area for hardening off.
Just take your time with it. You can't go too slow. That is the key. And remember, if you're hardening stuff off and it's like, oh shit, it's going to get really cold, and you're going to get, let's say you get a 2-3 day cold snap, but you've taken your seed shelf down, or they're too big and you can't put them on. It's better for the plant not to have any sun for a couple days than to get cold. Yeah. And they will live just fine that way. And so I did that last year where I put in 100 plus plants in my house and they got no sun. And that's okay. They will be fine. Yep. It's better to have no sun than no water and too cold. And remember, too, when you're putting them out, they are already bigger and they're drinking a lot of water. So they are going to be drying up, like Batavia said. But just remember that they are ready at this point. You feel that if everything was perfect, once they harden off, you're prepared to put that plant in your garden. And it is ready to live. So it's fully grown at this point as a seedling, and it's time. And at this point, your seedlings make all of the stores look like assholes because your seedlings are amazing. They're bigger and they're stronger. And damn it, they were cheaper. And you learned a lot. So just remember that. Remember when you look at those seedlings. And I would even say this. Go walk around and look at them in the stores and be like, ha, fool. My tomato was better than that.
That actually,
live your best life.
You've talked about this, like using what's in the stores as a reference. Last year, I forgot, because my peppers went out small. Last year, I forgot, how big is big enough? So I was in the stores looking at their, I said, I meant peppers, whatever I did say. And so I'm like, oh, shoot, these are fine. Let's get them outside.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen some pretty small ones. I've seen some giant ones. So, and just and last thing, because we do need to cut this off, don't let the plant fruit while it's being started. So if you have a tomato and it's taking a really long time, keep it from fruiting because it's going to weaken it. So
that's a great tip.
And when you buy a plant, you don't want to buy the one that's got a tomato on it.
Yeah, you're not going to get tomatoes or peppers or whatever that vegetable is sooner. Don't fall into that trap.
No, and actually, I argue that it would be delayed because it will go through more shock when you transplant it. So, and that's that. That's your seedlings. At this point, you're ready to plant them out. So you can go back to this episode, reference it, take some notes, whatever you got to do. I really hope that you have a good journey starting your seeds and you learn a lot and you enjoy being cheap like I do and being in more connection with your garden and, just have fun. So thank you so much. Thank you to all of our patrons. Thank you to our whole community. Check us out in all our places. Be safe out there. have fun, and just remember, we are 32 days away from spring.
Let's go.
Let's do it.
See ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Please follow us on YouTube at Backyard Gardens TV,
Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV, over on our website, backyardgardenstv.com, and then we have Patreon at Backyard Gardens.
and don't forget to check out our links below to help the show. Thank you so much for joining us as we learn to grow and grow for change. Cut.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for checking out the Backyard Gardens podcast.
If you like what we're doing and you want to continue to support the podcast, head over to our Patreon page to sign up.
You can also make a one-time donation using PayPal. Both of these links are in the description.
With your support, we can continue growing and helping others in their gardens. See ya.
If you guys want some Backyard Gardens gear,
Go to the link below and check out our t-shirts, mugs, pint glasses, and other gear.
all purchases go towards helping to support the show, so thank you so much in advance, and we hope you enjoy. We want everybody to have a garden, and we're going to give you a chance to win free seeds every month.
Head over to backyardgardenstv.com and enter your email address to be entered in all of our giveaways.
Good luck!
We want you to be a part of our gardening community. DM us a picture of your garden at Backyard Gardens TV on Instagram, and we will share it with our listeners.